Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the main event. On one corner, we have the hero swordsman, the Isekai character in the group that people would say should be the protagonist in any other anime, Logi Mist. On the other corner, we have the Kizuna 5's leader, hot-blooded, friendship-loving, environment-destroying, beast-summon hero Isekai from another world, Kizuna Red Togo Asaki. In 3, 2, 1, let's get ready to rumble! So this episode adapts chapter 3 and definitely will only cover chapter 3, starting from where Togo accidentally calls Poseidon Tresdon for some reason and confirming Togo is going to be living here because he keeps blowing things up. Classic Togo, even though Poseidon's not pleased. Naturally, it's because Togo's broke from the damages to items that they could scoop up during the quest. The anime adds Togo got a burnt claw from their latest adventure. Yudra's fine with it because she can study red more, but her surrogate grandpa disagrees. The anime clarifies Poseidon has served his family for 3 generations when the manga just said generations. So it's cute to see her play with him when she was a kid. The wording is different in between both versions, but Yudra asks him not to refer to her as a voluptuous or luscious way. And honestly, I agree with her, like, dude, you're kind of her surrogate grandfather. After all, in the manga, Red is looking at the portrait of Yudra, admiring her and her dad's similar eyebrows when Butler-san decides to castrate him. It actually sucks that they cut that scene. Also, not the most healthy thing to do to someone when your granddaughter wants as a guest, when you could just ask him to consent. Because despite some manga spoilers, Togo isn't really that type of horny, lusty person. Like, yes, we're all human, we all have our urges, but most people know how to control them, and Togo is no different. The anime also uses the word gelded, which means to castrate horses. The angle is different, but the anime adds Yudra actually trying to stop her grandfather before Tetalina opens the door and catches them on top of each other. After the opening, Tetalina praises them for being so passionate early on. The manga translation said afternoon, but thanks to the anime showing what it was like outside, it's reasonably changed to morning, with Logi or Rosie advising her to act more ladylike, despite being a complete hypocrite regarding his desires with her. On the bright side, Poseidon gets kicked out of the house. In the manga, it says punished as he's sweeping, but in the anime, it says he's regretful for his actions. Tetalina introduces herself. Wagure has been more reasonably translated as War Grey, like War Greymon, but with an E instead of a Y, and with 2 L's in Avalost, while also introducing a bluish-purplish haired hero and her attendant, Logi Mist. The original translations had it as Rosie, which I actually found more fitting since, as you'll quickly see, his personality is, fitting for a rose. Intentionally sweet, but will hurt anyone and anything that's a threat to Tetalina, in his eyes. Just like how he decides to execute our co-leads for their unintentional lewdness. In the manga, it's unsure which one is asking if it's a death sentence, so I love how the anime added their reflections in the sword, so we can actually see and hear Yudra asking if they broke into her house to execute her, and Togo's just the one trying to get them to calm down. Heck, technically, Tetalina was the one who broke in, and even then, she just casually opened the door. All the blame is on him there. Tetalina tries to smack him back to his proper and elegant senses. In the manga, she comes from the right, but in the anime, she lunges from the left to smack him. It's funny either way as she tries to calm them down, pointing out it's not their fault, even as Yudra tries to explain. Also, she's right. One of Logi's reoccurring character flaws is that he's not kind and tolerant towards other people despite having the title as hero. I do love the scene afterwards where he tells her she's the only person he needs love from, but I'm a little bit torn on how the anime did it. In both versions, you have the roses imagery around them. Thematically, the anime does a better job with the imagery surrounding them, but I do prefer the manga version since we actually get to see Tetalina's face and she generally does actually care for him. But she is there for a valid reason, trying to acquire the magic seeds and basically exchanging details with what they know about the guy with the magic item on his head from last episode and chapter. This is also a scene where I think the anime did better than the manga because Yidra only confirms Red defeated the latter there, while in the anime she confirmed that the guild reported that he went missing immediately afterwards, and Tetalina adds clarity that her actions ended up restoring him back to normal. They even gave him a name last episode, so it's good to show that a lot of the victims and the uses of these are high-ranking people in society in terms of status, because Tetalina is going to go into more detail about that later on in the episode. There's not much to say on Yidra tugging Red to shut up while Tetalina decides to explain the mana seeds. Basically, if you have a seed implanted inside you, or you implanted yourself with one, it boosts your mana or magic power that allows them to pursue their desires. The privileged magic, while the anime calls them privileged seeds, or privileged spells in this case, both of which end up working pretty well with what the anime is going for. Ironically, I might be making a short video later, but it's kind of similar to Miraculous Ladybug to enhance the person beyond what they can normally do if they were just human. The major difference between both versions is that our mage points out technically it could be a good thing in terms of being a magical, useful tool, but as our princess points out, just because it sounds good on paper doesn't mean it'll be good in practice, because just like in Miraculous Ladybug, the power kind of takes over the user, and while in Miraculous there is enough control that the user doesn't become that possessive, here the seed can develop and surpass the host of power so much that it can turn the user into growth test monsters like what we saw last time. Naturally, the question becomes, hey, wouldn't the royal family and scepter have something or done something about this, like, I don't know, banning them? But Tetalina rightfully thinks this has something to do with the royal scepter being involved in distributing them in the first place. Tetalina points out the mana seeds are expensive enough that they only end up in the hands of the nobles and rich, just like the person we saw last episode, which is why the anime was right in giving him a name and confirming that he was a lord. And looking back at episodes 1 and 2, despite the fact that the adventurers were going around experiencing these things for the first time, there weren't any guards or anything around to try and help people that might, or consider that there might be some sort of risk, especially if this has been going on for quite some time. And based on what we saw from last episode, it's pretty clear that Tetalina and Logi have been trying to deal with this for quite a while, so our heroes have more than enough reason to start going around exploring to find these things, or who's actually using them. Unfortunately, Shalula's got nobles backing her up, and both versions use different language to basically say, yeah, they're taking advantage of their privileged spells to make people around them suffer. Not to get political, but that actually sounds like what real-life people do to control people whose lives they don't care about for the sake of political power and gain. In the manga, Tetalina says that she wants to stop this no matter what, while in the anime, she says it's her duty to stop this regardless of the conflict, which is why she also asks for their help. In the manga, she says she went to Yidra specifically because she thinks Yidra is a wizard who can surpass Shalula, while in the anime, it's because Yidra's family wants it as a royal scepter, and ironically, that doesn't imply that before her family was taken out, these incidents weren't a factor. The manga isn't over yet, but it would be interesting if her father did know about this and was complacent. But personally, just having a good father who didn't join the villains fits better from a lore and timeline perspective, because that means that after Yidra's father was removed from the position, all of this started happening. So it really does prove that Yidra and her father are good people at the end of the day. Naturally, Yidra agrees, but at this point, we all kind of know her duplicitous personality, and they do a good job animating her expressions from the manga. Red naturally agrees, but then decides, it's time for the sword measuring contest, as Logi pulls out his sword because he doesn't want to work with someone with no manners, and in the anime, Yidra agrees? Personally, I would argue the guy who's thrusting a sword into your house at your ally and someone who's willing to help your other ally somehow shows less manners and respect, but hey, that's just me. Logi being honest and not wanting anyone to travel with Tetalina after she asks is funny, but in the manga, he looks at her directly when he says it, while in the anime, he just kind of stares forward. It doesn't really matter at the grand scheme of things. Naturally, it's time for our Red Ranger and Blue Ranger archetype to fight. Alright, so during the stare down in the manga, he's called a demon swordsman, while in the anime, he's called a solitary sword fiend. Both work unless you interpret demon swordsman as person who is a demon or person who slays demons. I prefer the anime name in this regard, taking several high bounties in the past. And he has a treasure that sealed the demon queen that was used by the former. Ironically, in the anime, when Logi calls Red a clown, that's after he transforms, when in the manga, he states that before they clash. I do love how Yidra shocked Loji's acting normal about it, but in the manga, her mouth was actually open in disbelief relatively compared to the anime, which I kind of wish they kept. They adapted Tetalina's excitement, though they took out Yidra's line of her getting surprised every now and then about what Red does. We get the fight and clash of weapons decently animated, and Loji decides to bust out a sword transformation. The manga calls it Sacred Sword second form, while the anime calls it the Holy Sword Dragraph. I'm not sure which one I prefer. That one's up to you. So Red decides to bust out the maximum Kazuna Kaiser. The anime having Yidra say, "I'm starting to question your humanity here," is perfect because it does raise the question, why don't Power Rangers or Super Sentai Rangers use their robots to crush the monsters of the week? Well, there's two reasons for that. In Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, one of Zordon's rules was that they can't be the ones to escalate a fight. For more conventional reasons, Megazords are way too darn big and are kind of impractical for fighting a smaller opponent and accurately targeting them. You wouldn't want to put people at risk of harming them. Plus, in a more open space like a fantasy world, yeah, it makes more sense to use it there. Plus, in this case, Loji's sword is Kamen Rider level in terms of form changes. But I was right. In my prediction video, I said Tetalina would fit the Pink Ranger archetype, and I was right. They even gave her the pink cockpit for Kazuna Pink. Yidra kind of points out that Togo's explanation that anyone could either join it if they formed a bond that's big enough means that the bonds themselves are pretty loose. But it does make sense. Red's a hero fighting for justice. Tetalina is a hero fighting against all odds. It's similar to what I said in the breakdown video. These two arguably have the best reason to work together out of the main four. But Rosie goes absolutely ballistic in using his flaming sword to fly and strike down the Maximum Kaiser, and he's too small for Red to target, which, Yidra, I'm glad you finally recognized that after you're the one who thought about using it in a cave last episode in Chapter 2. That being said, Togo's inspired by him so much that he busts out the Great Kazuna sword to use the force to blast Loji away like Team Rocket. The angle of shock from the lady's face is just as priceless in the anime as it is in the manga. And speaking of which, in the manga, we actually see the Kazuna Kaiser actually fly to the bushes where Loji landed, while in the anime, they have a few more seconds to imagine Loji dying, going farewell to the sunsets. She does eventually motivate him to go with them because Red's power could be a bigger threat than the seeds in hindsight. Tetalina is a lot more innocent in the anime the way she presents this, while she's, I want to say, not fake smiling, but more dreadful smiling in the manga, with Yidra and Loji also having more faces of comedic dread. They agree to head to their next stop, Ocarina, with what's going to be the usual shenanigans going forward. Togo says something and is more open and friendly with Tetalina while trying to bond with Loji. Loji gets upset at Red, and Yidra's rightfully concerned with this kind of lineup, and honestly, I would be too if I were in her shoes. Anyway, that's how the episode ends. Wait, there's still 8 minutes left. Oh, we're adopting Chapter 4 too. Never mind what I said earlier. Okay, so we end up heading to Ocarina, where it's supposed to be a bustling town with adventurers, merchants, and variety, but barely anyone's there. In the manga, we actually see the party asking for other people that are barely around, and they get rejected before the lady in the headband advises them that no one is talking, and it's best to stay clear of their lord, hence why Red's upset with the lack of bonds he can't forge bonds with. I think just having people hide behind their windows was a solid choice, especially if it was because of timing constraints. Anyway, Yidra noticed that there's an unsettling mana covering the entire town, meaning it might be under surveillance with Tetalina, not ruling out the potential of the privilege spells in place. Too bad speaking ill of the feudal lord gets Yidra almost pounded until Togo saves her from this nemesis-looking freak. In the manga, Togo kind of drops her after saving her, while in the anime, he kind of holds on to her the whole time, which I kind of prefer. And we get the feudal lord from Ocarina, Lugorat, which originally was Lugrat, but official translations, close enough. The defender of this town's order and peace, as much as the Teen Titans Go fan is the Jump City. Okay, no, a fan would probably call it the Teen Titans for doing a bad job. But oddly enough, in the anime, he's introduced with his eyes open. In fact, the anime and the manga switch between when he has his eyes open up. But anyway, Tetalina naturally asks him to hand over the seeds, but in the manga, Togo and Yidra are impressed with her determination, while Loji just kind of claps. So the anime only kind of adapted the clap for some reason. Togo calls out Lugarat for using order as a means for just, screwing over his people, with the whole people in town are lost that need paradise and his actions are helping people find a new direction nonsense. Like, he calls him out as spreading fear, and guiding people actually requires showing him the way, with Tet backing him up. The manga actually sees him transforming while in range in a shot that I wish the anime used. The anime, yeah, I talked about the anime and manga switched already, but the way that Lugrat's familiars work is that they can overwhelm Red, and Yidra deduces are pretty accurate. One of them passes judgment, and both of them can use Lugrat's magic territory to strike Red's blind spots, especially since Lugrat is looking at him using the speed of his eyes. Rosie deduces that the best course would be to use him as a decoy to figure out their weakness, but Tet immediately knows he's lying out of his mouth and makes him admit he just enjoys watching Togo suffer and wants to savor it, but immediately orders him to save Red. So yeah, we end in the middle of chapter 4, but for a cliffhanger of a change, Red gets knocked out of his transformation as he's about to call the Kazuna Beast. And that's where the episode ends. So, I had a feeling one of these episodes was going to combine chapters eventually. Given how chapter 3 was focused on the two duels meeting, in hindsight, it was a smart choice to have the episode carry on into chapter 4, where we get the effects of the magic season full force. Red has struggled in every episode, but this is the first time we see him lose, and no one can actually back him up effectively for now. So it actively works as a good cliffhanger. If I had to explain what the Monasee's plotline reminds me of in Toku sense, it's honestly Ryu Soldier and Dino Fury. In Ryu Soldier, the monsters of the week were based off human hosts and would cause rampage based on the user's desires. Meanwhile, Dino Fury changed them to the Sporix beasts, creatures born from eggs that can gather energy, and both the heroes and villains were racing to capture them. Plus, they can be used to power and nurture generals. I like this because it combines the two. The hosts become the monsters, and there's a drive to defeat and capture them all, so it gives the victims and villains more agency, while the heroes have more of a need to figure out who's distributing them. As an adaptation, I say episode 3 was handled well as I expected, but how they used episode 4 was really surprising. A smart move to end it halfway there as a cliffhanger. Again, Tetalina was a ball of joy, and when I started the manga, just like before in the breakdown, I did say she's going to be one that a lot of people would find a little bit suspect, but she does have her heart in the right place, and she is a good person. While Logi has his own charm, again, I can see why people wouldn't like him. He's a jerk, he's a tool, but he's loyal to Tetalina, and she'll be able to bring out his better sides as the anime progresses, but I can see him coming across as unlikable. I will say there are hidden layers if you aren't sold on him yet. There is a good reason I want you all to remember that she's the only person he needs love from line, because the episode does show that his intentions are noble, but his actions aren't. But yeah, this is going to be a nightmare to edit, so dear God. I'm almost 5 hours into working on this, so please like and comment. Let me know your thoughts on the episode. BIP from Bizarre Interest Productions, and have a good day. Signing off.